Hey there, everybody. If you can't tell, we are outdoors at the moment. Today, we're going to talk about some photosynthesis. The reality is we're going to get a real-world look at three major types of photosynthesis today. These include C3, C4, and what's called CAM, or cresylation acid metabolism photosynthesis. These pathways explain how plants capture and use sunlight, and they also help to explain why some plants thrive in wet areas and some in fields and some in deserts. The idea is these can look quite different because they do quite different things. And it all ties in directly to chloroplasts, to thylakoid membranes, to how plants produce oxygen and the sugars that they require. Further, because these different plants do photosynthesis in slightly different ways, they're going to look quite a bit different also. I'm standing here in the midst of a birch tree, and this is a C3 plant. It's the most common kind. You can tell by these broad, thin leaves, which are excellent for absorbing light in moderate to kind of even wet environments. C3 plants use the Calvin cycle directly in their mesophyll cells. But if it gets too hot or too dry, they start to lose efficiency because oxygen begins to build up. The rubisco begins to bind oxygen instead of carbon dioxide, and this is a process we call photorespiration, and it really wastes energy. Again, let's look at these leaves. Look at the pattern of venation here. Look at the way that this is structured, and this is a relatively soft leaf. These leaves are out here being big solar dishes. They are gathering light from the sun, and they are producing sugars. That is energy coming down here, folks. And this plant is using it. Even though the leaves might look a little different from here to there. They are all big and broad, and again, look at the venation pattern. All classic C3 photosynthetic plants. C4 plants do things differently. Like this grass. So while the classic C4 plant is something like corn, you will notice grasses like this, they have an appearance that's not unlike corn. This is crabgrass, as you would commonly call it. And I want you to look at the leaves. Look how different they look by comparison to something like this here. Alright? Look at the venation pattern. Look how it's all in straight lines, and it's rough. It's very rough indeed. This is a C4 plant. The leaves are narrow, they stand upright, and they are better adapted for really hot, dry environments. Again, not corn, but very similar to it. Great for very hot, very dry environments. C4 plants solve the photorespiration problem by using what's called spatial separation. You see, these C4 plants fix carbon in their mesophyll cells, and they move it to bundle sheath cells where the Calvin cycle occurs. This keeps carbon dioxide high and reduces wastes, preventing photorespiration if at all possible. And then, of course, there are CAM plants, like this prickly pear cactus behind us, which we will not be holding for obvious reasons. Cresylation acid metabolism plants have big, thick, fleshy leaves so they can better hold water, and they do photosynthesis in a slightly different way. You might have heard of plants like this being referred to as succulents. These are adapted to incredibly dry, arid environments, and their leafing, if you will, is just very, very different. These are big, thick, chunky leaves, and they are adapted for holding water in unique situations and doing photosynthesis in a slightly different way. Let's talk about it. Instead of separating the process into different cells like in C4 plants, CAM plants separate them by time. At night, they open their stomates and let carbon dioxide in to store it. During the day, they close their stomates and use that stored carbon dioxide for the Calvin cycle. The idea is this is a temporal variation. They vary by time. So let's finish this thing out strong. Here we have some C3 plants, common in cooler, wetter climates. They struggle with photorespiration when it gets very hot. And again, look at the leaf pattern. This is what C3 plants appear to be. They are like big solar panels gathering sunlight. C4 plants, like this grass, live in hot, sunny environments, and they separate the steps of photosynthesis by different cells. And again, look at the venation pattern. Look how different it is by comparison. CAM plants dominate in deserts with their big, thick leaves and nighttime-based carbon dioxide uptake. They're going to keep their stomates closed during the day when it's hot and open them up at night so they can exchange gases. Look at how different these structures are by comparison. All of these strategies revolve around the same core process, and that is photosynthesis inside of the chloroplasts of these autotrophic organisms behind me, where sunlight energy is going to be converted into chemical energy, something like a sugar, something like you would think of as glucose, which is important to you, a heterotroph, because you have to consume your energetic sources to survive. And that is to say that these plants are making the foods we need. They are fixing the energy required by our processes and allowing for life as we know it to survive. So not just oxygen, but food as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've benefited from this process. And, go out and say thank you to some trees. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you on the next one. Quiz time. What sort of photosynthesis do you think takes place within these organisms? Thick, fleshy leaves. What kind of environment are they adapted for? By comparison to something like this, can you imagine these soft leaves in a desert? What would happen to this plant very quickly if it didn't get water?